Greetings, everyone. My name is Emmanuel, and I would like to welcome you to our program today. We are continuing with our series on rebuilding a new and prosperous Africa through decentralization. You see, the kingdom gospel has two pillars. The first pillar is the transformation of the individual. And the second pillar is about the prosperity of the nations, of the transformed individuals. And basically that is the promise of the new covenant in Ezekiel chapter 36. God, through the prophet, said he was going to transform the Jewish people, give them a new heart, put his spirit in them, cleanse them, change them, wash them, and then bless their cities, bless their nation. So these are the two pillars: national prosperity and the transformation of the individual. Two pillars of the kingdom gospel: transformation of the individual and the prosperity of the nation, national prosperity. But it's unfortunate that we as Christians, we think that, giving in the church and receiving is the only means by which we can prosper. That's not the only means. Giving is good. But as Christians, we must focus more on national development, national prosperity, because your prosperity depends on the prosperity of your nation. Most African nations are poor. As a result of that, many Africans are poor. That's why many Africans are taking the risk to leave the continent. And some are going to Europe and they are dying in the Mediterranean Sea. Some going to America through Mexico and through the jungle. They are also having serious challenges. So this issue about national prosperity is very important. Christians have to really understand this about the kingdom gospel. Because if your nation prospers, the believer in that nation and non-believers will also prosper. If the country is poor, there's no magic you do. There's no giving, and even though giving is important, giving it to your church helps, the church to spread the gospel. And you can also be blessed through your giving, your tithes and offering. It's important. Give to your local church. It's important. But equally important is the national prosperity. Because if the nation prospers, you also will prosper. If the nation creates the enabling environment, it will be easy for the citizens to prosper. That is why this subject is very important: national prosperity. Christians should not just leave this in the hands of unbelievers. For a nation to prosper, that nation must have, a good political system, a form of government that encourages investment, that encourages risk-taking, that encourages, the production of goods and services so that people can do business and people can prosper. But when you have a nation that does not have all of this enabling environment, the citizens will suffer. So that is why today we are continuing our series on rebuilding a new Africa, rebuilding a new and prosperous Africa through decentralization. The Africa that we have today is not working for the poor people. The people who are enjoying, in Africa are the politicians, are some of the business people. They are the ones making all the fortunes. They are the ones who are receiving the contracts, the people who are connected, to the people who are in government. They are the ones making all the money. The poor people are suffering. That's why the system has to change. We have to reject centralization in favor of decentralization. So today we'll be looking at the kingdom concept of decentralization, how the kingdom concept of decentralization can, fight corruption in Africa, can reduce corruption in Africa. This is important because Africa is losing a lot of money as a result of corruption. I saw a statistic one time that Africa is, losing about $140 to $150 billion every year due to corruption. Could you imagine? That's money that can be used for investment in Africa to build schools, roads, provide electricity, drinking water, and other basic necessities to the people. But because of corruption, 140 to 150 billion leaves Africa every year. And that is affecting the development of African nations. So this is a serious matter. We also discussed yesterday about, how the kingdom concept can also, in the area of the military. You see, Africa also, the kingdom concept of decentralization can mitigate conflict. Do you know that even in Africa, about 15 to 25 billion dollars also leaves Africa, for the purchase of arms? All of these resources could be used by African leaders to invest in their nation, but they are buying arms to kill their brothers and sisters. Why? Because of centralization. The centralized system that we have in Africa is not working for the poor people. That is why we need to change, the centralized system in favor of a decentralized system. Now, in a central system of government, we define centralization as, the concentration of power in the hands of the ruling elites, the concentration of power and resources in the hands of the ruling elites. And because the ruling elites, they are powerful, they make, most of the decisions, the contracts, they give it to the people that they know, and the people give them kickbacks. The poor man in the village, the poor person, you don't have access to government. How are you going to get contracts? How are you going to come out of poverty? You see, so centralization is killing Africa. Centralization is killing, a lot of our countries in Africa. Why? Because power and resources are in the hands of the elites, are in the hands of the president. So it is like a one-man's government, one man's rule. It's only the president that is ruling and his aides around. Those are the people that are enjoying all the prosperity that God has placed in our nation. Remember, God is your father, and you are heir of God and joint heir with Christ. So God has already blessed your nation with everything that your nation needs for their prosperity. So when you are broke, you cannot be going and praying in the church, for God to bless. God has already blessed your nation. That is why He wants Christians, to take the responsibility to change the system. Because the system is not going to favor you. The Christian is not going to favor the poor. The system is not going to favor the orphans. The system is not going to favor the strangers, the widows, the marginalized, the oppressed. The elites are the ones who are benefiting from the centralized system of government. So we said centralization is a concentration of power and resources in the hands of the elites. And because these elites are so powerful, centralization encourages corruption. Now, just take, for example, the president of a nation. He's untouchable. No one can impeach him. No one can, bring him to court. So the president is so powerful that even if he does something that is bad, he is not punished. And as a result of that, he keeps doing it, and he favors his people. If his people also do certain things that are bad, nobody can punish them. Why? Because power and resources are in the hands of the president. You see, in certain countries in Africa, for example, the president controls all the three branches of government. The president is the chief executive officer. He controls the presidency. And then he also controls the legislative body and the judicial body through his powers of appointment and dismissal. The president has the power to appoint, the justices in your Supreme Courts. So, because he can appoint the judges, he also has the power to dismiss them. Just imagine if the president appoints the judges that sit, in the Supreme Court. Do you think they are going to rule against the president in a country where you have a centralized system of government? There's no way it can happen. So the judges will favor the president. And then even in the legislative, the Senate and the Assembly, most of those legislators, they are part of the president's party. Because in some countries in Africa, the election is being organized, by the ruling government. They have their top people in the election board. So they manipulate elections. Many people think that election is when they conduct election in a country and they talk about, there is election in this country, therefore there is democracy in that country. It's not true, because elections can be manipulated. Elections have been manipulated. People who won, because the president is so powerful and, he will falsify the results and change things. So you see how difficult it is, to transform a society or to fight corruption in a centralized system. So most of the people in parliament, in the Senate, they belong to the ruling party. So the three branches of government that are supposed to act as checks and balances, they are not checks and balances because they are not independent. The president has his people in all of this, in the different branches of government. And the reason why Montesquieu, developed this separation of powers is because, he thought that when the government has three branches, these branches will check each other and there will be, justice in the society. But in most African countries, the president controls, the presidency, he controls the legislative branch and he controls the judicial branch through his powers of appointment and dismissal. In addition to that, the president also appoints all the ministers and even the prime minister. So the president has the right to dismiss them as well. In other countries, like in Cameroon, the government has a national television station, and they also have a print version, Cameroon Tribune and CRTV. How can a government be involved in opening a radio station and a television station, and they also have a printing press? That kind of function should not be carried out by the central government. But you see, because our leaders don't understand the purpose of government, they are doing things that it is the private sector. It's the private sector that is supposed to be doing, the issues of media, not the government. The government can have their own press people or press corps that, they can be sending out their information, their propaganda, but it's not the duty of the government to have a radio station, a television station, and a print, station. When most African countries got independent in the 1960s and in the 70s and 80s, they established these things because then it was, propaganda. They were trying to, let the people know about what they were doing. But things have changed. So the government have to sell their radio stations, sell their TV station, and sell the print because they are making a loss. Those people who are managing those institutions, they are not making any profit. The government has to take money and then put it in those institutions. Like we said yesterday, when we are talking of sharing of power, through the kingdom system, the government, the central government maybe it has about 5 important functions. For example, defense, finances, immigration, telecommunication, and some of the most important subjects that the central government can handle. You handle 5 or 6 functions, and then you give the remaining functions to the regions or the states and the local government, so that there is division of labor. And then there is another area where we call concurrent list, where the central government can perform certain things that the regional or the state governments are also performing. But the central government should be a limited government. Why? Because when the government is too powerful, when the government is too big, it encourages corruption. That is why the government has to be limited government to reduce corruption. That is why this kingdom concept of decentralization is very important. When a country, adopts the kingdom system of decentralization, corruption will reduce. You see, in a centralized system also, there is no freedom of speech. There's no freedom of assembly. There's no freedom to petition the government. There is no freedom, to peacefully protest against the injustice, of the society. Why? Because power and resources are concentrated in the hands of the elites. So they have the military, they have the police, they have the gendarmes. When you people want to organize something like a peaceful protest, they will send the military, send the police, and they'll chase you guys, arrest other people, and lock them up. You see, so when there is no freedom in a society, citizen journalists and professional journalists, they cannot dig for information. They cannot expose corrupt political leaders because they are afraid of their own lives. We have seen many cases where journalists are arrested arbitrarily and tried for nothing, put in jail. They don't even care whether they have families. So these are some of the things that are, encouraging corruption in our nations in Africa. Most of our nations in Africa, our leaders, are abusing their authority. So centralization is not good for Africa. Centralization must be rejected. We have to go back to the kingdom concept of decentralization. That's the only hope for Africa to bring prosperity and development and transformation to our continent. So when there is no freedom, it is very hard to fight corruption. The media people cannot expose corrupt leaders because they are afraid of their own lives. When there is freedom, there is also the freedom of information. So journalists can go into government offices and ask for certain documents. In developed countries, they have the Freedom of Information Act, where people can get information from the government to find out what why political leaders are doing what they are doing, to dig for information. But in a centralized system, the government doesn't share information. You cannot do a very thorough investigative journalism to find information and to expose corrupt leaders. So corruption is very difficult to combat in a centralized system. But in a decentralized system, the people have freedom. Like we said the other day, God gave Adam and Eve maximum freedom in the garden. The only thing that God limited them was not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That's the only limitation. Just one limitation. But in a centralized system, people are prohibited from doing so many things. You see, so there's no freedom there's no freedom of expression, freedom of carrying out research, investigation, to expose corrupt practices. In a centralized government also, the president controls all the branches, almost all the branches of government. The president controls the legislative branch and the judicial branch through his powers of appointment and dismissal. The president also has the power to corner the labor unions, because in some countries, labor unions are very powerful. So these politicians, they understand how to corner these labor unions and bribe them so that the labor unions will not come out and peacefully protest against the government. And the government also, in a centralized system, they also know how to deal with the military. So all these powerful institutions are under the oppression of the elites. They know how to handle the military. They know how to handle the labor unions. They know how to handle the legislative body. They know how to handle the judicial body. They know how to handle, the ministers. In some countries, ministers don't even have a voice. They are all yes sir people. Anything that the president says, that is what they are going to do. And that is what they are doing. So in a nutshell, a centralized system is just the rule of one man. One man ruling a nation. He has all the power, absolute power. He's like a king. He's like a monarch. So in that kind of system, it's very hard to fight corruption. That is why corruption is rampant in Africa. So you have the lack of freedom. You have also the branches of government are not independent. The government, controls the institutions also, the powerful institutions like the election committee or election boards, the body that organizes elections. In most countries, you have the government is the one that appoints the people that run the election board. So if the government is the referee and the organizer of elections, do you think those elections will be free and fair? They cannot. So these are the challenges, that most African countries are facing. And that is why most African countries are poor. It's not just the leadership alone. The leader, because of the absolute power that he commands, he controls the other institutions. There are no checks and balances among the three branches of government. One of the reasons why you have the three branches of government is because the Montesquieu and even the Americans who came up with the federal system, they were trying to restrict or combat corruption. It's not only the three branches of government, you also have the vertical accountability system. You have the national government, the regional or state government, and the local government. So the three tiers of government, the three levels of government, and you also have the three levels, the three branches of government. All these things, these are systems that, runs in a country, system that run in a country. Why? So that the country will be prosperous, will be effective, will be efficient. In most centralized government, also the bureaucracy is inefficient. And when the bureaucracy is inefficient, there will be corruption. So these are some of the challenges that, most of our countries in Africa are facing. That's why we have high level of corruption in our countries. Like I said in the beginning, over 140 to 150 billion leaves Africa as a result of corruption. You see, the reason why we have very strong political leaders also is because there are also foreign nations who want to deal with our leaders. So they cannot allow our leaders or our nations to have strong institutions. So sometimes some of these external forces are also behind the destabilization of our nations in Africa. So they make it in a way that the president is very powerful so that the legislators cannot impeach the president or the judiciary cannot investigate the president. So the president is very powerful. These external forces, they know what they are doing because they are profiting from the system in Africa. So even if African countries have problems, just like Cameroon now has, political instability between the Francophones and the Anglophones, why is it that the international community is not coming to help? Because they know what they are getting from Cameroon. They know that if the president is very strong, the president is involved in certain things, nobody can question him. They know the business deals that they are getting out of Cameroon. So we know these things. We know that these external forces, they are also responsible for our poverty. So Africans have to wise up, especially those of us who are Christians. We have to come up with a strategy on how to change things. You see, let's pray all we want in the church. It's not going to work. We have to create a new form of government. That is why this platform is proposing a decentralized system of government so that our people will come out of poverty. Just a few people in a nation are enjoying all the blessings. Why? We are God's people. God has given us the blueprint in the Bible. I'm teaching some of these things now. Some people don't even have interest about it, and some people don't even know it. And then we'll be praying. Africans can pray, but things are not changing, and things will not change until some of these things are brought to the limelight, until the form of government is changed. Until we change the form of government. Now, when we change the form of government, the judicial branch is independent, the legislative branch is independent, the presidency is independent. Now we can begin to talk. Because when the president does something that is bad, the legislators can initiate the process of impeachment. And that will make the president to sit up. The judicial branch also, we have the power to strike down some of the policies and the laws that are being passed, or the decrees that are being made by the president. They will strike it down as being unconstitutional. So when you have independent institutions in a country, because of the decentralized form of government, you see how things will begin to change. Now, in a decentralized system also, the military is an independent branch. The president cannot manipulate the military. In a decentralized system, the media is an independent branch. See, the government should not have anything operating their own media. That's not what the government should be doing. The government should focus on defense, finances, immigration, foreign affairs. Those are the things that the government should be handling. But you see, because we are in a centralized system, the government is just doing what they think is best for them. And in a centralized system also, to do business is very difficult because the government puts a lot of controls, a lot of regulations, a lot of price control measures. That is why in Cameroon, in the 2021 Ease of Doing Business, Cameroon ranks 167 out of the 195 countries in the world, or 193 countries in the world. Could you imagine? The reason is because of the centralized system in Cameroon. And a centralized system is not friendly to businesses. That's why foreign direct investment cannot come to the nation. And when foreign direct investment cannot come to the nation, jobs will not be created, things will be difficult. Do you know now most African countries are aligning now with China because they can get easy loans from China. But China, we know how they have manipulated the United States of America to be where they are now. If not of their manipulation of the US, they will not be where they are now. Just imagine if China can get away with some of its nefarious dealings with the United States, how much more African countries? China will just oppress them and just do what China wants to do against African countries. The reason why we are in deep problem is because nobody can question our heads of states. Nobody can question our leaders because they have, the authority and the power to just arrest you and put you in prison. They prefer to deal with China instead of dealing with America or France or Great Britain. These countries, they are democratic. They at least, even though they are exploitative too, but they have laws that, people can easily sue them. So it's better for African countries to deal with France, to deal with Europe, to deal with America than to deal with China. Because China has, it's also a totalitarian state. And our African governments are learning certain bad things from China and applying them in our countries. But nobody can say some of these things while you are living in Africa because your life is at risk. So Christians are the people that are supposed to understand these things even more than unbelievers. Because God has given us wisdom and we see what is happening. And God has given us a blueprint of the decentralized system of government in Genesis chapter 1 verse 26 to 28. In a decentralized system, you have freedom. When there is freedom, there's going to be prosperity. In a decentralized system, you have the sharing of power. If God can share power with man, how much more our governments? Who are they not to share power with their brothers and sisters? If God can share resources, why is it that our governments cannot share resources with their brothers and sisters, with the states or the regions and the local authorities? If God can do it, that's the system that we have to follow. A decentralized system, not a centralized system. In a centralized system, the government, the leaders, the president, he's the one that has all the power and authority to control every other person. That's why there's corruption, there is, conflict in Africa. And you have to understand that when there is conflict and corruption, the money that the government is supposed to use to invest in the country, the government is not investing in the nation. And when there is no investment, there can be no prosperity, there can be no production of goods and services. Remember, the main reason why there is decentralization is because you are transferring power from the central government to the regional governments and the local governments so that, the government will be efficient in the provision of public goods and services to meet the needs of the people. But when power is being held by the president and his aides, it is very difficult for there to be efficiency in the economy. But you see, we as Christians, we are only praying. We have been praying for 60 years, even more than that. What has happened? Nothing is going to change until the form of government changes. We have to move away from centralization to decentralization so that we can unleash, the economies in Africa, so that we can unleash prosperity. We are not going to blame God. God has already blessed us. Now, we are the ones as his ambassadors, representing him in our various countries. We have to organize ourselves and start demanding for change, start demanding for political change, doing it in a peaceful way. But, it is a risky business to be a Christian and to be a pastor, because you cannot allow, people to be suffering like that. We cannot allow people to have challenges when God has already blessed us. Like the continent of Africa, so many things. So, we are talking about the kingdom concept of decentralization, curbing corruption, reducing corruption, fighting corruption. We have said that in a centralized system, the president controls the legislative branch, the judicial branch, the military, and the election board. And because he controls all of these powerful institutions, it's very difficult, to fight corruption in our nations. And we also talked about, there are no freedoms in a centralized system. People don't have the freedom of speech. People don't have the freedom to assemble, the freedom to protest, the freedom of information. So it is very difficult to fight corruption in a centralized system. And we have said that, every year about 140 to 150 billion leaves Africa as a result of corruption. So to change the whole situation, to bring prosperity back to Africa, we have to adopt the kingdom concept of decentralization. In a decentralized system, the government shares power with the different levels of the government, the regional or central government. The central government shares power with the state government or regional governments and the local authorities. In a decentralized system, there is freedom of speech. People have the right to protest peacefully against their government. People have the right to petition their government. People have the right to seek information and to expose corrupt leaders. So when all of these things are done, corruption will come down. And in a decentralized system also, businesses flourish. Why? Because there are few regulations. But in a centralized system, a lot of regulations and businesses cannot really flourish. For the example is in Cameroon. Cameroon is ranked 167 out of 193 countries in the world. Why? Because of too many regulations. And if businesses are not flourishing, goods and services will not be produced And if businesses are not flourishing, people will not invest in the economy and people will not have jobs. Most African countries have very high unemployment. Why? Because it is only the government that is employing a lot of people. You see, this is why the government has to be small, a limited government, and then the government has to encourage the private sector, open up the private sector, reduce the regulations so that people can be able to open businesses, people can be able to invest in the economy and create jobs and employ many people. But, our leaders don't do this. So that is why the church has to be at the forefront trying to bring change, because we have a responsibility to defend the poor and the weak. Thank you so much for listening to this message. Please share this message with your friends and family members and leave your comments. We are going to continue tomorrow. Until tomorrow, bye-bye.